Women in more than 24 states face an abortion ban if the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade. That, as you know, is the landmark 1973 decision that legalized abortions nationwide. Today, the Judiciary Committee is holding a hearing on access to abortion care. Dr. Ravi Perry, chair and professor of political science at Howard University, joins us now to discuss the issue. Dr. Perry, thank you so much for being with us today. First, just describe the significance of what is happening when it comes to Roe versus Wade.
Well, yes, and of course, always glad to be with you. And I think that this is something that we cannot underscore the significance of enough, particularly those of us that are men. This is an issue about the right to privacy, the right to privacy, which was founded in our Constitution by Supreme Court in 1973, almost 50 years ago. And it is that same right to privacy that not only protects women's right to choose when to have a baby and when it's safe for them to do so, and whether or not they want to carry to term a baby that was forced upon them via rape or incest. Those are really personal decisions that have to be left to a woman and their doctor and their God. And the government really, is too big of a body to be in the hospital room when that decision is being made. And we need to remember that. And if we are going to see the slippery slope, then we should be very concerned about similar rights that have been founded as being protected of individual rights by the United States Supreme Court over generations, including things such as integration of the military, integration of public schools, and of course, same-sex marriage as well. These are all potential major landmark issues on the chopping block if this Roe v. Wade decision is upheld, given what the leaked memos suggest and the precedent and the terms in which they are using to make that argument, which would put all those other cases I just mentioned in jeopardy as well.
And we're going to talk more about that leak in a few minutes, but want you just to elaborate. We know that this is an issue that disproportionately impacts Black and brown communities. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, so it's often, remember, poor families and particularly Black and brown families that have limited access to healthcare in general. So that means finding a PCP, finding an OBGYN that is reputable and within a reasonable distance and that your insurance can cover. It's very difficult for African Americans, many of whom don't have that insurance that covers these kinds of procedures that many people label in the insurance pharmaceutical world as elective. And so that is a challenge in and of itself. And then to put this burden on top of that with challenging folks that may have income challenges or limited economic mobility, and then women in general who may be in rural areas who just make it that much harder for them to find the full access to care. Most of these people are Black and brown. Most of them are women of color who we are talking about here. And these are the populations that are most likely to be vulnerable. And let's remember, when we're talking about taking away a woman's right to choose, we also have to remember the separation of church and state, which is the ideal of our nation's founding, in which we know for many people, this pro-choice decision is driven by their particular interpretation of their conservative evangelical religion in the Christian faith. And that is a particular version of Christianity that should be called out for its limited view in the way in which they do not honor individual rights. We are in for a very, very dangerous time in American jurisprudence if the Supreme Court does, in fact, strike down Roe versus Wade, particularly if it's done in the way that it's presumed, which would be a 5-4 decision. We remember we used to have an era in this country where issues like this that were so major would only be taken up if it were that significant to a majority of justices. Take, again, Brown versus Board of Education, which on to this day in 1954, May 17th, it was decided. And that was a unanimous decision, decided by folks who were appointed by both Republican and Democratic presidents. And it's unfortunate that we are a far cry from that type of a Supreme Court set of justices that actually makes decisions of this magnitude with the general public in mind.
Dr. Perry, you alluded to this off the top. GOP lawmakers want to enforce a federal protest law. Tell us more about this law and what exactly does it prevent people from doing?
Well, similar to the laws we've seen in places like Georgia, right? That want to say that it's illegal for you to stop and help someone who was in line, getting ready to vote, and giving them water and food. These are the same GOP tactics where they want to prevent folks from being able to, protest at public officials' homes. This is just not the America that we teach about in American political science, at least not in my classes, where if you are a public official, you open yourself up to that public scrutiny. It's part of what's expected of elected officials. Now, do we want people to necessarily not be able to enter their driveways and be able to sleep peacefully in their beds? To an extent, but ultimately, if you're a public official anywhere in the country, you have to sign your name and your address on some public roll that lets people know that you are in this position because you seek to represent the people. And that is something that we need to remember. I know we conveniently forget that when it comes to Supreme Court justices, because we like to believe that they are somehow absolved from the political currents of Washington. But, that was also just a misnomer. These are folks who are appointed clearly by folks that have political agendas, U.S. presidents, and whether they're on the right or the left, to pretend as though that you suddenly lose all of your political allegiances once you don a black robe is just simply just not what I know that the founders had in mind. And so we have to do a better job of both keeping up the Constitution's right to protect protesters. And yes, if you are a public official, you may not like folks protesting at your home. Maybe we can create some stations to make sure, folks aren't trampling on people's grass or preventing them from entering their driveways. That is something that can be dangerous. I'm reminded of, for example, Medgar Evers being killed by KKK members in their driveway. No one wants to be, subjected to violence at their homes. However, it is important to emphasize if you're a public official, you should expect that people are going to, when they disagree or when they agree, are going to look up your address because it's public record and try to go, get a word with you. That's what we want about our citizens to do with public officials. And yes, U.S. Supreme Court justices are public officials.
Dr. Perry, Chair and Professor of Political Science at Howard University, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your insight, especially because we got to pause for a minute and acknowledge this is your day. This is your birthday. Happy birthday to you.
It's my birthday. Yes, thank you.
How
thank
are you
So
celebrating?
much. I really appreciate it. I'm 40, so I'm over the hill.
Oh.
So I have to go find this hill somewhere. So.
Do you feel another year wiser?
I do. And grateful for another year of life. It's been a rough pandemic and season for everybody. And we're all here this morning and, bless you all.
Well, thank you so much for being with us on your special day. We appreciate you.